Hello, everybody, and welcome in. I am Greg, recruiting extraordinaire of Hail Varsity, and I am joined by Steve, staff writer of Hail Varsity, this week for the recruiting question of the week video. We are without Aaron today, but Steve is so graciously kind enough with his time to pinch hit for Steve. How are you this morning?
I'm doing great, Greg. Anxious to tackle this recruiting question with you.
Yeah, you get to dive into some recruiting. Normally, you and I are together 2 days from now on Thursdays for the football video of the week. But we do a topic every week. If you guys don't know, make sure you're liking and subscribing to the YouTube channel so you can get those videos as soon as they come out. Usually we do that video. This week, Steve's jumping in on recruiting as well. And again, I appreciate him. And this week's question comes in from Craig Casper, who had a really interesting kind of thought-provoking question for us, who said, I just watched Mickey Joseph's remarks this was last week. Among them, he's telling the room that they're playing for roster spots and that if they're not improving, then they're not going to play for him. How hard is it for a university to pull a football scholarship? And with the portal, could a team drop 5 to 10 players that they don't think are moving forward enough to then get 5 to 10 more players out of the portal? I'll start here. I think that it's interesting. There are a lot of, I guess, there's always been a lot of talk around roster attrition and how it actually happens, right? Because it's one of those things that you never quite know how it actually goes down, because I would say maybe 5 to 10 years ago, it was a lot more taboo for teams to be quote unquote cutting a player or encouraging them to move on. I think it's always been kind of the nicer version of that. But I actually think that thoughts and feelings around that have changed a little bit, just given how much player movement there is within college football right now. And I really kind of think that the transfer portal has really ushered in a different level of these conversations and maybe kind of open the floodgates for those questions or for those conversations between coaches and players to be a little bit more transparent and honest.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think back to our previous media availability with the offensive players on Alante Brown, and he one quote from Alante that stuck out to me was, he said himself, this is a business and nobody's job is safe. He understands it. That means a lot of other players probably understand it, that in, right now in 2022, it's more of like now that the portal is here, it's more of like an NFL free agency type thing where people are coming and going almost every single year. And so the opportunity to, see that roster movement each year is going to get a lot more higher. And, it's kind of rough for some kids and it's kind of good for some others that are looking for a fresh start, but that's just the way it is nowadays. It's not like it has been. So an adjustment period is needed, with the college football programs and kind of determining how they want to attack it. But yeah, it's a lot, the likelihood is a lot more higher right now that kids can move on and instead of, staying put and kind of spending time in a program for maybe 3 or 4 years.
Yeah. And I think that you hit on a really important point there, right, too, is that it goes both ways. It's not just the coaches or the teams that are, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, looking to get out of these situations with certain players. It can also be player driven, because they may look up at the depth chart and see, man, I'm just not playing. And it's not even the depth chart. I also want to make sure to say that is that it doesn't take until the fall when that first depth chart comes out, if it comes out in some cases. Shout out to Nebraska and like Michigan, who does that all the time too. It doesn't take until then. You can see it in spring ball right now. I guarantee it. There are players at Nebraska that are not getting as many reps in practice that they think they should be. Therefore, they know that they're not being able to showcase the skills that they think that they have. And they may not be in the plans down the road. Remember, we're in a situation this spring where Nebraska has a lot of new pieces, a lot of new coaches, a lot of guys that need to be able to show what they can do. And if you're looking up and you're seeing, and I don't even want to put a name to it, if you're at a running back and you see that other guys, there's 3-4 guys ahead of you getting more reps than you and you're on scholarship, you're going to look around and think, man, maybe it's time for me to look at something else. Then I think, again, that's where those conversations come in. And they always have the conversations post spring ball. They have them. I know they have them again after the season as well, where kind of Frost Frost sits down with all of the players and kind of picks their brains on how things went. And then they can have some of those conversations if they apply about whether or not things are truly working out. But it also is a good thing for the players because they can also say, hey, I don't know if it's working out for me. I know that there's a handful of guys ahead of me on the depth chart. Coach, what do you think I need to do? But I may need to go and do that elsewhere.
Yeah, there's always going to be stories with like that where you see the player wanting to move on and try his hand somewhere else. But then there's always on the flip side, like stories that, you know, are kind of the good stories of if a player stays and sticks it out. We just saw that with Ramir Johnson in the running back room last year, where, you know, he entered the spring and fall almost fourth on the depth chart at running back. And, you know, things happen, guys go down, and he gets his opportunity during the season and kind of does pretty well and kind of opens some eyes and impress some people with how well he did in Nebraska's offense. And now look at him, he's looking like he's going to be one of the kind of three in that three rotation piece that Brian Applewhite always talks about at running back. So yeah, it's always, there's going to be a ton of players, you know, hitting the portal just because they want to actually play somewhere. You go to college football to play football. And some places it might be harder to come by. But then there are also going to be the stories like Ramir Johnson, guys that stick it out, wait for an opportunity. The opportunity presents itself and they go take it. So yeah, there's always going to be sides on both sides of this thing.
Yeah, and I don't think that, you know, to Craig's point about, you know, could a team drop 5 to 10 players and kind of swap those parts out? I don't know if it's ever that many, or it needs to be where the team is like pushing 5 to 10 guys away, or if that just kind of naturally happens. I will be totally honest, it does happen. There are guys, there are times where people, you know, have those meetings and coaches are brutally honest and say it's just not going to work out for you here. But I do not think that it's so cold that the relationship stops there. I do know that in a lot of cases, teams will try to help you find something else. Because remember, all of these coaches are so connected to other coaches around college football that they at multiple levels of college football, right? Because so many of them worked their way up from lower levels of football. So they just know a lot of guys. Or there's also always medical scholarships and different hardships, things like that. If you're going to be done playing football, or if you've had kind of a career debilitating injury, so that you can remain on academic scholarship and still finish up your degree. I know that it always kind of has a negative connotation, and there's, you know, they just push the guy out, but there are steps that come after that sometimes as well that can be beneficial to the player. And oh, by the way, it helps the school's reputation, right? Like, you want to be known as a school that does right by your players, even if it doesn't work out for you, even if it doesn't work out for them, because you did sit in a kid's living room and kind of promise his parents that you were going to take care of them. You talked to the high school coach and you did all of that. You want to keep those relationships good, because you just never know what's going to happen down the road.
Yeah. That's just an interesting thing to think about, was just the process of the whole recruiting landscape. You go and sit in some kid's living room and talk to his parents, and like a few years down the line, you're kind of helping him find a landing spot somewhere. So that stuff happens, and it's just a kind of interesting way. And getting back to the question, 5 to 10 players, at first that seemed like a lot, like that's a big number. But if you think about it, just for the whole team, like that's happening every single season nowadays. So yeah, if we're talking about one position, like 5 to 10 players at a position, like, yeah, that's kind of a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot. Yeah.
It's a very, very interesting way of going about things, and how a program needs to adjust specifically in this modern day of college football, transfer portal, NIL kind of things going on. So
there's so much happening right now and moving parts.
Yeah.
I don't envy college football coaches for how they have to balance and manage all of these things, especially as so much of it has changed just in the time that Scott Frost has been at Nebraska. A lot of this stuff has really taken off, right? So if you think about it, in his case, he wasn't a first-time head coach, but his first time at a big-time Power 5 school, and then having to manage all of that, and then like having to manage the coming home aspect of it too, is a really big deal. Like, he did have a lot to kind of learn on the fly with all of this. Because think about how many of these things we were not talking about this way when he first got the job, and how much he's had to adapt and adjust. Like that is difficult.
Yeah, and it's always kind of like a little bit of funny to me, like when somebody asks, when he gets asked something about like these new things that are popping up with college football, and his go-to response is always, yeah, it doesn't matter what I think. I'm not answering that. I always get a little bit of chuckle like inside about how he just says like, I'm not answering that. Nobody cares what I think. I'm not going to make any headlines here. So yeah.
Well, that's the thing. It's funny because the people do care. The people in this state definitely care. And if he knows, and he's definitely smart enough to know this, if he were to come out and say, blast the transfer portal, it would get run everywhere. Plus he can't do that because they're using, it was a real part of their strategy to boost this 2022 team so that they can make a bowl game this year. Right. Like, so he can't, but I do appreciate that answer the same way that you do, because I do understand where he has to come from on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Whenever he says it, I kind of just like check off, like, oh, he said it again. Nice. Yeah, it's an interesting kind of time to be alive right now in college football, especially for media and coaches.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, hey, that's going to do it for us today. Make sure that you're checking out the Recruiting Notebook tonight on hailvarsity.com. It runs Sunday through Thursday at 6 p.m. Central Time. It's appointment reading. I'll dive deeper into this topic here later on tonight, kind of discussing this whole thing, because there are a lot of moving pieces with it. And I think the transfer portal is obviously here to stay. You guys keep asking questions about the transfer portal. I think that it will continue to be really the hottest topic outside of quarterbacks and I guess now defensive line with the current team as we continue to move through. Hey, well, yeah, tight end is a fast riser right now, not for a good reason, but it is a fast riser right now in discussion. And hey, who knows? Maybe we'll have a video on that in a week or two as well. But we will catch you guys next time.